Welcome back to the podcast, everyone. Today, my guest is a mastering engineer, and that's the first for the podcast. We've had on artists, had comedians on, and just all various forms of art, but we'll get into the nitty-gritty with this episode.
Oh, yeah.
Today, my guest is Matthew Wolk.
Matthew Wolk Mastering. Glad to be here.
Hell yeah. So let's start from the very beginning. Your website's very extensive with your background, and I'd love to just hear you say it live on air.
All right. How far back we going? Like before?
Where were you born?
Where was I born? Okay.
Yeah, were you born in Seattle?
I'll give the short little story on how I got to Seattle. So I was born in LA. We moved from LA to North Idaho when I was 5. So I really have no recollection. I don't remember anything of LA. Mm-hmm. Parents wanted to get out of there after the 94 earthquake and just get out of the crime and all of that. So moved up to North Idaho, small little town, Post Falls, Coeur d'Alene area, if you know where that's at. Yeah. Super green and forests and just low key everything compared to LA. So had a great childhood, grew up, nice neighborhood, cul-de-sac. So how I got into mastering was in high school. So I started to get into music pretty heavily, and I started DJing.
Oh shit!
And not like a good DJ. I just was dabbling with like being like an iTunes DJ and hit and play at a party and starting to build up the equipment and to really get into it.
Can you scratch though?
I was getting to the point where I was wanting to get into some of that stuff, and at that point was when I was like 18, getting ready to go to school. And I decided to go to the Art Institute of Seattle. Basically what got me into it, I was like, how the hell are people making like all these crazy sounds? Like, EDM was super huge when I was like 18. So
what year was that roughly around?
2012.
Okay.
Yeah. So I was super intrigued by like how they make music. So I was like, okay, well, what do I want to do? Like, let's see what music's about, and found the Art Institute, and they offer like recording and mixing and production. So went for it and moved out here a year later when I was 19, and been here ever since. The Art Institute was a wild experience. Basically, they teach you everything of recording, production, mixing. They don't teach you mastering, which I'll get into that later. Sound design, live sound, and it was towards the end of like my third year, like the last year of school, the last year we had there, and our instructor, it was one of these advanced mixing classes, and he decided, okay, so today we're going to talk about mastering. He's like, we don't teach it here because it's the dark arts, and you guys need to learn the ways of the Force before you become a Jedi, is basically what he was saying. And I'm like, what the hell is this mastering thing? So he gave us a 4-hour introductory of like, here's how you can safely master your own music and your own mixes. And I got hooked. I'm like, there's way more to this than what he's saying. He just gave us the basics just so we don't screw things up. And so from that point on, I just started like doing my own research, deep diving it, bugging him like, hey, can you teach special topics on mastering? I want to know more. And so nothing really came of that. So I started looking into like internships and pretty much everything.
In Seattle?
Yeah, in Seattle. There was like 3 top studios around here at the time. They're still around. They're kind of like my competition at this point. Ooh. But wanted to intern at a place because I had no intention of doing my own thing. That is what it is now. I had no intention of like building my own studio and starting my own mastering company. I didn't want to do that because it's crazy expensive. It's really hard to break into at a young age. And so I wanted to intern somewhere and like kind of magically ride the train on up and like have somebody train me and teach me the ways, and that's just not how it works. So kind of got rejected and turned down on most of the internship inquiries, and even just like, hey, can I come over sometime and see the studio?
Even with your like college background?
Yeah, no, I mean, at the time, so after I graduated was when I was trying to get all this going, and I was working kind of like 40 hours a week full-time day job I worked like really weird hours, like 11 to 8. And so like everybody would be out of the studio by that time, or in the morning they're busy with clients. So like nobody really had the time to have me over. And so I'm like, all right, well, I guess if no one's gonna, take me on or show me the ropes, I guess I got to do this on my own. And so 7 years in the making as of today, it's like,
Hell yeah.
here we are, just teaching myself, failing a lot, learning what to do right, what to do wrong, and going from there. So it's been a hell of a journey.
So with college, is there any jobs that you were looking to get out after like finishing college? Like what are some, after taking all those classes, what do like the professors say that you can, career fields you can go into after that?
Yeah. So, man, that's a tough one. It's basically like anything you can get. So the first day when I started school, which it was kind of like, it should have been like a red flag, like leave now. One of the deans of like the audio program, he's like, hey, so there's like 30 of us in the room. And he's like, out of all of you guys in this room, how many of you guys, when you're done with school, want to work in a recording studio, like start your own studio, do music every day and work with bands? And of course, everyone raises their hands. And
bring the mic a little closer, by the way.
Yeah. So everyone raises their hands, and including myself. I'm like, oh yeah, hell yeah, that's what I came here for. And then he's like, you're all fools. And I'm like, okay, $80,000. What am I doing at this school? So he basically like day one warned us, like, that's not going to happen. You're going to get corporate jobs. You're going to hustle if you want to do that. You're going to have to like find your own way to those studios. We're all young and dumb. We didn't believe him, but sure enough, I'm up my last year of school, career placement. Lady's like, okay, so we've got Amazon needs AV support. There's Microsoft. They need some like, part-time stuff for events. And I'm like, what the hell? Like, we went to school for audio. What is this?
Oh God.
And so I had a friend who worked doing the AV support at Amazon. So I took that.
What is AV support?
Basically, Amazon has like a bunch of conference rooms and event spaces, and their teams have they have big events, and they need like wireless microphones and people to help run sound.
So it's like stage management.
Yeah,
basically.
it's basically like, oh, the projector's not working. Like, hey, can you fix
Tech
it?
support.
It's like, so I did that for 5 years while building up mastering, and I just as of 6 months ago made the leap, quit, and have jumped into this full time, and it's been amazing so far.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So what was it like working for Amazon? Like, did you enjoy it at all, or were you hating every minute? Or
it was tough. It's definitely a mindset. You have to get your head around like, oh my God, I'm doing a day job that I don't want to do. I went to school for music, but a guy I worked with he was higher up in the ranks, and he's also like a music guy. Most of the people on the team were music guys, and he's like, I know you don't like this right now, and this is not going to be your full-time thing, and this is not, you're not going to be here for 25 years of your life or your career, but the time that you're here, learn from these people, because they're some of the smartest people like you'll ever be around. And yeah, you're on the AV team and you're not the one doing all this crazy invention and things like that, but if you absorb and take away like what you hear in some of these meetings and some of these events and put that into your own business and your own life, the sky's the limit. So I'm like, okay, well, let me make the most of like my time here. And I think I didn't like go in there proactively, like, let me like listen to every single meeting and see how I can make my business just like Amazon. But
was Jeff Bezos there ever?
I actually was partly like direct support for Jeff Bezos.
Oh shit.
It was really nerve-wracking, but yeah. So yeah, I mean, I just kind of absorbed what I could and like kind of learned business sides of things and use that. Like, how can I implement that into my situation? Like, Amazon's huge on leadership principles and, like invent and simplify and customer obsession. Those are things that they're like their core values. So it's like, okay, well, how can I invent and simplify on my end with like mastering, or how can I be customer obsessed? So just kind of taking those things into my own situation and helping better my business and things like that.
Is art school a scam then? Like, could you learn everything that you learned at your school on YouTube?
No.
Okay.
Okay. So let me talk about YouTube for a minute. So I guess specifically towards mastering, you know, people who are putting out these YouTube videos, there's so much. There's a lot of people doing it. So you really have to like filter down and find out who's actually saying like the valuable stuff. And the pros and the people who are like, winning the Grammys every year or charting on iTunes, like they're not making the videos. So it's like, okay, well, if you want to figure out how to be like an industry standard of like, a mix engineer or producer, like you might not be getting the right information on YouTube because you're learning from somebody who's doing YouTube videos like every week because they're monetizing on that to make money. So they are sometimes saying the right things and the right procedures, but oftentimes it's just like the context of some of the tips that they're teaching you is not correct. That's a very vague answer, but you have to be very cautious with YouTube. Where with going to like a college or any kind of program that's specialized in music production, like you're learning from instructors and professors who have had 20 plus years in the game. They know what they're doing, and they can kind of teach you the things that you won't find on YouTube, if that makes sense.
So was it worthwhile for you to go to school, or like, because you're focusing on mastering?
Yeah. So I've always been questioning that myself. Kind of like, well, I went to school for all of this, but I ended up somehow getting into mastering, which was not taught. But mastering's kind of the final stage in like the music production process. So learning everything before that is very important to like. If I didn't know recording and mixing and how things should sound, there's no way I'd be able to do mastering, because I wouldn't have the grasp of like, oh, here's a mix, here's the balance that you need to listen for, and like the kick needs to hit like this and the vocals sit here. So things like that really help me kind of like grasp the whole mastering situation. And I guess we should back up just so people who are listening can understand like the process. So mastering is the last step. So my analogy that I always give people with making music, so there's like 3 main steps, and it's like baking a cake. And this is the very dumbed down version. So when you're going to make a cake, you have to first get your ingredients, go to the store, so that's recording. You're getting, if you're doing live drums, you're going to the studio, you're recording your drums, you're getting your bass, your guitars, like synths, vocals, background vocals. You got all your ingredients.
The stems.
Flour, sugar, eggs, So then once you have everything you need, that's recorded. So now you're in the mixing phase. So that's literally mixing it all together and getting your batter nice and good. And then when you're feeling good about it, tastes good, you export your mix, and that's like, you throw the cake in the oven and it comes out just a plain white cake, or chocolate cake, if you will. So what's after that? It's like, okay, well, if the goal of the cake is to get it into the window seal to be sold, that's like, okay, you're going to make a song, you want it to be distributed on Spotify or whatever. So the final stage is getting it presentable for whoever wants to buy the cake. So that's mastering. It's putting the frosting, the sprinkles, the happy birthday, whatever, like, the final, put it in the window seal, it's a cake. So that's the very basic, like, if you don't know anything about music or anything, you can think of it like that. I always like to give a second explanation. It's the stuff in between the lines that people don't realize is what makes good mastering. So it's, you can easily, anybody can go to YouTube and learn, they can learn basic mastering techniques, but it's the things like, if you work with an artist consistently. So like, for instance, Anna Thompson, I've worked with her on like everything she's ever put out. So there's something to be said about that, is you kind of like become familiar with like certain things in their music that, need to be corrected or smoothed out. So like, okay, Anna's vocals, certain frequencies need to be kind of like tamed, or certain frequencies need a little push. So like the in between the lines of like the mastering side is you work with people regularly, you work with, you know, the same mixing engineers quite often, and you get to kind of learn their mixes, learn their songs, like learn the artist's voice, and figure out where it needs to go, and you just start like remembering and knowing like how you need to get that song
It's a relationship
across the finish line. Yeah. So it's like, yeah, I can easily just slap on some plugins or some processing on someone's song and then call it mastered. But it's that stuff that like most people don't think about, or what you won't learn on YouTube is the experience of it, I guess.
Right. I thought mixing and mastering was like a bundle. Like if you're going into a studio or wherever, people know you have the mixing and mastering guy.
Yeah. So that's the unfortunate thing for me being specialized is I could easily, you know, do my own. I can offer mixing and mastering easily because I was formally trained on that in school, but I personally didn't like mixing. I wasn't that good at it. I could, you know, get by for my projects, but there were so many people in my class who were just like really, really fucking good at it. I'm like, damn, what am I going to do? Because if like the industry is already saturated with so many people doing everything, then it's like, well, you got to kind of find what you're best at. And so that's why I moved towards mastering. And then what kills me is like, you know, it took me 7 years to get to the point of like just barely getting by doing it full time. And that's because everybody's doing everything. There's, you know, jack of all trades, master of none. Everywhere you look, there's somebody who's a producer, engineer, mixer, and mastering engineer. It's like, pump the brakes, find what you're the best at. Like if you're really good at producing, just do the producing. Like,
so no one's like 100% well-rounded, do you feel?
There's some people who do like everything who are actually pretty good at it, which like power to them. Like you are like a unicorn. But honestly, like I won't mention names and I don't want to like get flack, but like there's a lot of people in Seattle who are like, you know, producers, engineers doing everything. They are not good at mastering. And
Got it.
I feel like I can say that being specialized in this and having spent 7 years just focused on that. Like I can hear right away when I go and like listen to the final product. I'm like, well, there's like this, and this with the master that I hear that could have been better if they would have sent off to somebody else. And the main thing is perspective. You don't have the fresh perspective when you're doing it all on your own. So if I got a good example for this, and I think Alex and Anna will be okay with me telling the story. And you had Alex on Fluency a couple weeks ago. So perfect situation of not having the perspective. So Alex and Anna had been working on their
they just put out a new song too.
Yep, I did that one. So they had been working on her EP for 8 or so months before I even got any of the songs. And so I had just worked with her on Get Me High with Jake Crocker, and that one just kind of blew up and like took off. So she was trying to like follow that up with the next single, which I don't remember which one it was going to be released, but she ended up sending me telepathically, and she's like, so I'm working with Fluency, and at the time, like I think I only did one song for him for a different artist, and she's like, I really like the song, it sounds good, but there's just like something about it, it just doesn't compare to like what we've already done. And she's like, I'm referencing Ariana Grande, and like it just doesn't sound like it's there yet. And so she's like, can I send you it, and then like let me know what you think of the master? Because he at the time, he didn't really have a dedicated mastering guy, he just kind of did everything on his own, and he's pretty decent at it. So he was just, you know, getting the song across the finish line. And so she sends it to me, and right away I hear exactly what the issue was. It was, you know, he didn't have that perspective. He had been working on it for way too long. So like the thing was, it was super resonant in the low mid range, like with the background vocals and the instrumentation. So it was kind of just masking her vocals, and they were kind of sounding dull and not really like, you know, shiny pop songs. So she's like, yeah, if you want to give it a shot, and then, you know, if it sounds better, I think we'll just go with you for the rest of the project. So she sends me the mix, and then like a day later I send it back to her, and she's like, oh my God, okay, yeah, we're going with you. Like, and it's nothing against Alex or his mastering ability. It's more or less when you've worked on a song for 8 months and you've been the producer, recording, you know, mixing and doing God knows what else to the song. When you get to that point of like, all right, now let's master it, you have no fresh perspective on that song. Like you can put some processing and try and like get it to sound mastered, but it's like, just like what I was saying, it's the stuff in between the lines. It's like, well, you know, right away, my first impressions and my first instincts was like, oh, this is the main issue. It's just like, it's too resonant here, clear that up, add a little bit of more sheen to her vocal, and it just popped, and that was it.
Can you break down the definitions for people, what the difference is between mixing and mastering? I know Stella Mar and Nicholas kind of explained it, but that's from an artist perspective.
So mixing it's very granular, and this is why I don't like it. It's just too specific. You know, it's like, okay, you're you know, you start with your drums and your bass, and you're trying to like get the kick and the bass to kind of fit well together, not overpower each other, have enough room for everything, and then you kind of start building upon that with your vocals and the guitars and synths, and it's just kind of like balancing each little thing in your song. So like, and that's very vague because you can have, I don't know, in today's age, I'm not sure like how many stems people are working with because I don't mix, but you know, you can have 20 tracks in a mix, or you can have 200. So it really just depends on the song.
Does one make better? Does like more stems make a song better or
I think
worse?
Less is more is always a good approach. So I mean, if you have 200 elements in a mix, like it could be a killer mix, and there might just be little things here and there on their own tracks. But I think the less you can do to make the song sound great, the better. And that's, you know, I do a lot of work with Jay Crocker, and then like that's his thing. Like he produces incredible productions, but like if you see some of his breakdown videos, they're very minimal. It's just like kick, 808, you know, a little bit of synth bass, and then just some little tasteful elements of like instrumentation. So mixing is figuring out all of the mess, which I just didn't want to deal with because I wasn't good at it. And then, you know, you get into like constant revisions, and I can't tell you how many mixes I've been sent where it says like version 42, and I'm like, I'm glad I'm not doing that.
Does that
like,
take away from the art, do you feel like? If you're just the guy going in and changing the beat, do you kind of like start not liking music and you're just looking at it as a tech perspective? Or
some people just love that though. I think for me, that's what it was, is like it just became kind of just nitpicky and mundane, so I didn't want to do it. I wanted to, and this is the beauty of mastering, is you get the mix when it's finalized and everyone's stoked on it. They're like, yeah, the mix is done, we're ready for you to master it, and everyone's happy with that. And basically my job is take that mix that they're in love with and just make it like 10%, 15% better.
So it's just one like, solid audio line when you get it? Or
so I basically, you know, you can do stem mastering, which we don't need to get into that. Basically what I do is just take the stereo file, like the left and right export of that mix, and just little fine tuning things. Like, so with like Anna's song, like, okay, well, let me carefully scoop out some of the, you know, the low mids and like create some more sheen in the top end, and you're just kind of like shaping. It's just subtle shaping, you know, not getting too into like the technical stuff, but like there's sometimes you got to do compression or, you know, some saturation to kind of add some vibe, and then, you know, at the end it's like, okay, well, let's crank the level up, radio ready, like loudness. And so that's basically mastering. And that's, you know, anyone can go on YouTube and learn those specific processes. It's like, okay, well, how do you start? Oh, you got to do this, and then you do that, and then you do this, and you do that. That's the flaw of YouTube, is they tell you the techniques, and they kind of give you like a basic, like, first you do EQ, then you do compression, and then you do limiting. And it's like, well,
it's not that straightforward.
No, every song has to have its own approach. And it's like, yeah, I have like a whole desk full of gear, but the way I use the gear changes every single song or project. It's not, you know, set it and forget it, run a song through and it's mastered. But that's what a lot of people are doing who do their own mastering, is and I don't want to. That's just me assuming.
Mhm.
So
You
maybe
can probably
not,
too. You probably
but
have an ear for it. You can probably. I can
yeah,
pull
I
up
mean,
like some Billboard songs. You can say this one's mastered better than another.
and honestly, if you're doing your own mastering, then that's literally what you're doing, is just slapping on some stuff at the end that you think is going to get it to sound a little bit better. In reality, what you should do is send it to somebody who's never heard the song, who's specialized in mastering, and they will know right away what needs to be done to it. I mean, I've been sent mixes where I didn't have to do anything to it, but just put on a little bit of the final limiter to get the level up. Like, it was that perfect. Like,
But then those limiters are probably like expensive. It's not like you're just doing like a stock one that you get from a DAW or what.
it's I mean, I use what pretty much everybody else would probably use, like FabFilter, Pro L, and everybody's using the same tools, but it's more or less how you use the tools.
And what do you need to master? You just need like FL Studios or Logic or whatever, or what?
So I have like a whole desk. I'm all hardware based, and
Okay.
that's just like my preference. I like the disconnect from the screen, but in today's age, like, plugins are really, really damn good. And like, I have like a mobile rig that, if I want to go out of town for a little bit and get away from the city, I'll master on that, and nobody knows the difference between, if I'm working remotely or if I'm on my desk at home with like $50,000 worth of gear. So, it's more or less find what works best for you. Like, the tools don't matter, it's how you use them. So, it does matter about how you resonate with the tools, if that makes sense. So it's like, you can try the demos. I'm like, no, I didn't really like this. So you find something else that kind of does the same thing that might work better for you. And that's kind of, over the years, what I did is like, did a bunch of research on gear, and it's like, oh, this
7 years.
is gonna work.
So I feel like you probably know what you like at this point, right?
Exactly. So yeah, I mean, you can do it on basic stock plugins in a DAW, or you can spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on the best gear in the world. What really matters is that you know what you're doing, and that's my argument with people who do their own mastering. It's like, you might know the techniques, but you just can't know what needs to be done to it if you've heard the song 400 times.
So am I basically mastering my podcast every time I put it out? If I'm just throwing on, like, if I'm like denoising the audio and
Well,
like putting
that's
or what is that?
That's a different thing, because
Ollie's laughing over here.
a podcast is like, it just needs to sound clean, and the levels need to be consistent. But it's not
Right.
like music varies so much, because there's hip hop, there's genres. So it's like, okay, hip hop needs to sound one way in the low end, and then there's pop music and rock music. Everything kind of has its like signature sound, and then there's different songs that will kind of challenge that. But that's the other thing that specialized mastering engineers are good at, is getting your songs and your mixes to be competitive in those genres. And
So what about in like the 1950s? Like, are those songs mixed and mastered, or no? Because they sound like, there's like there's a noise and everything.
So back in the olden days, and like the
we had horse and buggies.
60s and 70s, like when vinyl was kind of becoming a new thing, because shit, back before that, it was like, oh man, I don't remember the history. I should have paid attention. But no, like, mastering back in the day, it really kind of started in the vinyl era, because and it wasn't necessarily like a process like what it is now. Like, mastering, it was like there was dedicated people in like lab coats and rooms with stacks of machinery, and their main job was they were more of like a medium transfer engineer. So it's like, okay, well, we recorded the tape, but the consumer is going to listen on these like plastic vinyl discs. So how the hell do we get it on tape onto this disc? So they basically figured out a way with all this machinery to like go from the tape deck and cut it into a groove on a disc. And there's some things that needed to happen in order for that to work. And that's kind of where some of these techniques of like, compression and EQ and the processing of what happens in mastering, that's kind of how it started. And then from there, it's like, okay, well, how can we make it louder on these on vinyl? And like, oh, we got these crazy guys who are just like experimenting and doing like wild processing moves. And like, finding the right things that actually work to make like the record louder, and then that gets into like the crazy loudness wars that everyone talks about. And, like,
Yeah, so there's no like
yeah.
actual level, just depends on the artist,
Yeah.
the song. And
So that's kind of like where mastering started. It was dedicated like transfer engineers, and nobody knew what the hell they were doing. It's just like, how did you get that on tape and onto this disc? And then
but does mastering sound different from like a record to a CD to a tape to a streaming service? Or?
Absolutely. I mean, the simplest way to say it is like, okay, well, on vinyl, it's going to be kind of like warmer and more dull sounding, because just the vinyl medium can't really support like super tizzly, sizzly high end like we have right now in today's like pop and hip hop.
Mm-hmm.
Hi-hats are like the enemy with vinyl. They just don't cut well. So everything sounds like warmer and more full, and like honestly, a lot of people like love the sound of vinyl, and I think that's why it's coming back. It's more natural. Like there's less compression. It's just, you can, if you have a good hi-fi system and a good record player, and you can just like get lost in it.
Could it ruin a song then? Like if you have like a super bassy whatever hip hop album, and then you want to put that on vinyl, can that actually like ruin the experience?
It just depends. You have to go to somebody who knows what they're doing with like transferring it to vinyl. Mm-hmm. So now we don't really work with tape anymore. Most people don't record a tape, but so now there still are like vinyl like cutting engineers, and they have these crazy like $100,000 lathes, and their job is to take it from the stereo mix file and put that onto the record. But what they're actually working with is more of like and I do offer this, I rarely do it, is a vinyl pre-master, which it's it's the same concept of like you're mastering the mix kind of in the same way, but there's certain things you got to do a little bit differently so it'll transfer to vinyl a little bit better. And I don't have a lot of experience with vinyl because it's super expensive, and most artists don't want to cut to vinyl. I think I've only had like 2 or 3 that I've done like pre-masters for, and then I send files to them, and then they go to somebody who has the equipment to actually cut it. And those guys have their own tools to like, if something that I did still wasn't to their needs, they can tweak it even more to get it to go better on vinyl. So
right.
It's still kind of like a dark art that nobody knows. I one day like want to sit in a room with somebody who cuts vinyl and just like sit there for 8 hours and watch them do it. Yeah, that's the one thing I just have no experience with.
So what do you offer? Like, what is everything you offer on your website? And
yeah, so I mean, it's basically just mastering. I mean, I do have like other services where I'm trying to get into like doing some commercial like corporate audio work with like if they need some like noise reduction or dialogue cleanup, I can do stuff like that. But for the most part, like 8 hours a day, what I'm focusing on is just mastering singles, albums, EPs. I do have services for if you want to get something on vinyl, I can help you get that prepared, and then you go off to somebody else. So that's basically it.
Do the services change depending on the artist or the genre?
Not really. I mean, really the only change is if I'm working with a label, it's, a little slightly higher rates and things like that. But for the most part, it's pretty simple, straightforward service.
How many artists have you worked with?
Oh God. Oh man. I have a whole archive of everything I've ever worked on, and it's pretty extenuous. I don't know the number of how many artists. I know I'm about to reach 1,000 songs mastered.
Wow.
Yeah, I have like a whole playlist that I'm trying to like, it's hard to keep tabs on it, but like, when something new is released, I'll throw it on the playlist at the top and just keep it growing, and just so I can like keep tabs on everything I've done, because it's, I'll go to like a show or something and they're like, oh, hey, I'm like, oh God, who are you? I can't remember who you were.
Oh shit, yeah, you worked with them.
That's why it's just, I like to be behind the scenes, because I don't have to like remember everyone's face and this and that. It's been pretty wild to have people like, come up to me like, are you Matthew? I'm like, wow, like people actually know who I am. I'm not just some like shadow in the background like working on music for people. Like, that's cool.
Wait, do artists need to be in the room with you at all, or like how do connections work for you?
Not really. I mean, right now I'm not in like a big professional studio with like crazy speakers. Like, honestly, right now I'm in my apartment working on like the best headphones in the world. But
Which are the Sennhausers or whatever?
no, they're Audi's LCD4s. They're like $4,000 headphones, and I've got like
That's crazy.
Yeah, no,
Are they
I've
from
got
like
like
Germany or where are they even from?
I think it's a German company, Audi's. I'd have to look.
I used to be huge into like looking at headphones.
They're wild. So like there's another guy who's like a pro mastering engineer, Glenn Schick, and he
From Seattle or outside? Or?
he's in LA, but
Okay.
he's got like 25 years experience. He's worked with like Little Missy, like all of the hip hop scene. But he used to have this big glorious studio, and he kind of just sold it all, and he got these pair of headphones, and he was like, I'm just gonna travel the world with like my laptop and these headphones and just be a digital nomad.
Holy shit.
And so like I found out what headphones he was using, so I picked those up. And the main reason right now while I'm working on headphones is because I don't have a good room. I don't have the best speakers. So that's the other thing about mastering is you have to have a good listening situation, whether it be you're in a world-class studio with like $50,000 monitors and the best acoustic treatment, or, in my case, I don't have that. So the next best thing is to work on headphones, eliminate the room. And basically these headphones have been like compared to like the equivalent of listening onto a $50,000 like system in a perfectly treated room.
And do you just listen to songs on this also, or is it mainly just for work? Or
I mainly just for work, but yeah, sometimes I'll throw them on and just listen. But they're pretty heavy and annoying to wear, so I don't like just casually listen on them. But
how do you feel about Beats headphones?
I used to have a pair when I first moved out here, and they're terrible.
Really?
Now that I have experience of like what good quality like
Yeah.
speakers and headphones sound like, they might have gotten better, but I'm talking like 7 years ago is when I had a pair. So I don't know. They could.
Is there like what's a better headphone than Beats that isn't like crazy expensive? I guess Beats are already like $200. Like, do you think Skull Candies are better than Beats?
Honestly, yeah. If they're $200, don't do that. Just go out and buy like, look up any of the pro audio headphones, and like anything in that realm of like $250 to $300 is going to be 10 times better than Beats headphones. I mean,
wow.
I used to have a pair of these Focal. Oh man, I don't even remember what the number was, but they were like only like entry level $200 headphone, and I think I got them like when I was in school, just because they were better than like the generic headphones they gave us when we like first started. But yeah, I mean, anything that's you go in Sweetwater or Vintage King and you find headphones, they're going to be a lot better than Beats.
What about those Ray J, the Ray Beat, are they called the Ray Buds? Oli, do you know what I'm talking about? Raycons.
So funny story is I fell into that trap with like the whole hype of that. I'm like, oh well, I want some wireless earbuds because I was sick of like the wired stuff, and so I got those because I didn't want to like, oh, everyone's getting AirPod Pros, like screw that, I'm gonna get these. They're garbage.
Shout out Ray J, they're garbage.
Oh my god. You know how Spotify on your phone you have like the EQ setting and the playback settings? You should, oh man, I wish you can see how terrible of like a EQ curve. Like there's so much low end on those earbuds, it's insane. So I had to like scoop everything out, and like there's just no detail.
So how do you feel about like the SoundCloud era of like a Juice WRLD and XXXTentacion, who were able to blow up with like no mixing or mastering for their songs?
That's, I mean, unicorn. I don't know how they do it. I mean, even like my brother's like really big on some of like the underground hip hop stuff, and I don't remember the artist he was telling me, but there was like some artist that's like huge in the hip hop world that does their own like production, mixing and mastering, and it's pretty damn good. Like he's played me the album. I'm like, he's a unicorn, man. Like that's legit. But most of the time that's not the case. Like, if you, and I guess here's something, if you're making music and you're trying to do it for, to blow up, and you want to do this full time, look at what's going on in the mainstream scene. It's like, are they, is Ariana Grande going to like her brother and having him produce, mix and master in their bedroom? No, like she's working with some of the top producers, the top engineers in the world. They're going to the top mixing guy, and they're spending God knows how much mix, like 10,000 plus. And then
But why do you think it needs to be that expensive? Like, do you think
it doesn't need to be that expensive.
Mhm.
It's those engineers are capitalizing on the labels being able to pay that. That's the thing, is those same engineers probably have an independent rate where, like, you know, if you or I were an artist and go to them, it might only be like 700 a song or something like that. But they're going to people who are specialized in their craft. Everybody's got a different piece of that puzzle, and then you get this glorious sounding album. Everybody always talks about, like, Billie Eilish, like, oh, they're breaking the standard, but like, not really. Like, yeah, they recorded at home and they produced at home, but they still had top mixing and mastering. So
look at Stella Mar's album. That album was amazing, man.
Oh yeah, I mean, shout out Moses, man. He's incredible for, like, how young he is and how relatively new to all of this. He's mixing, like, the quality of his mixes sound like some of the people who send me mixes who have been doing it for like 10 years. It's insane.
Yeah, I can't believe I had them on the podcast. Like, they're literally like, I like asked some of my high school friends at the time. I was like, "Do you guys know any artists?" And one of my friends happened to know Lorelei.
Yeah.
And I was like, "Okay, cool. I don't really know much about her, but
oh man, Lorelei. LA's got a gold mine right down there with her. She's so damn good."
So, how do you feel about artists? I don't know if you get this often at all, but how do you feel about artists who say they make music for themselves? I feel like when people say that when they're just starting to make music, they're like, "Oh, I just make it for myself." I feel like they're saying that because either people are giving them shit or they know it's shit. But do you think they would change their mind if they had like someone who actually produced the beat and mixed and mastered it?
That's hard for me to answer because, I mean, if they're just doing it kind of like a hobby, then that's fine. But honestly, that's an expensive hobby. If you're doing music just because you just want to put out a song for your friends and family, that's great. But if you're trying to actually make it into like a business, which that's the thing, is most people don't treat their music like a business, and you need to do that if you want to have any kind of success in not having a day job or not doing music full time. Is you have to treat it like it's your business. And there's a lot of artists in Seattle who are doing it right. Marketing, promotion, all of that. You need to get into that. Obviously, budget is a huge factor. Like, you can't have the best of everything, but whatever works best for your budget is what needs to happen. So I can't tell you how many people, like, the benefit for me is, like, I'm a service, so like I will get paid no matter what, and there's always things coming in, so it will always work out for me. But I sometimes just feel for some of these artists because they just don't have any direction, and like they come to me with really great songs and really good potential, but they just don't have a way to like throw it out there and like get more people involved with it. So, and that's not on me to like tell them that, but a lot of people just, that's how they do it. They're like, I just like doing it for myself. I'm like,
they say
Spotify
that,
and they got one monthly listener. It's like, oh my God, you could be so much bigger than this.
I want to show you some songs after this podcast, because I think I understand from like even from like a listening standpoint if something's mixed and mastered, but like I have some artists in Seattle were like, "No, man, I'm telling you, I went and got this mixed and mastered." And I'm like, does that mean their song's just bad, or like I feel like.
Yeah, so, and then to defend me, like, bashing on people doing their own mixing and mastering, I know a lot of it also has to do with the artist just doesn't have the budget to go to someone specialized. But there's like the two scenarios. The artist just, they don't have that funding and they don't really care. But then there's also like the oath of the producer, I guess I'll if that makes sense. So, an artist who has no experience with anything, for the first time, they're coming to somebody like, hey, I want to make a song or make an album. They're coming to somebody who knows how to get that done. I think it is on that person to guide them on the correct path based on their budget to get it to be the best it can be. So if you're going to take somebody who's brand new and green at this and you're going to say, yeah, I'm going to produce it, and then I'll mix it and then I'll master it and then you'll have a song. It's like, well, you're kind of screwing the artist almost in a way, because you're robbing them of the experience of, cool, yeah, you produced it. It's fine if you produce and mix, like that happens quite a bit, but at least give them the benefit of like option A, I can do the mastering if you don't want to pay for this extra cost, or option B, we have a guy who just does this. He's great, guy or girl. There's tons of, there's a lot of women in the industry who are killing it at mastering. It's like, send it, allow them to have that opportunity to experience like professional specialized mastering, because most people don't realize that it's two separate processes. It's just blended, mixed and mastered now.
Do you need good taste and like have rhythm to be able to be a master?
I don't think so. I'm no musician myself, or like that's the hardest thing for me, is like trying to dissect some of like the elements and like communicate with somebody, like, if I get a mix that's not quite there and I'm like, what the hell is that instrument, like trying to like
it's an oboe,
like
man.
that oboe, yeah, or like, is that a mandolin or a guitar? I don't know, just whatever that sparkly sound. Yeah, so it's like I don't think you need much of like the musician side of things to do mastering. You more or less need a really damn good ear, and you just got to know like the categories and the genres and how things need to sound. And that's I'm probably just going down the wormhole here, but that's the other thing is, so artist goes to producer and they record, mix, master, and they're stoked. They're like, yeah, it sounds amazing. But the other thing is like, go and reference that to anything that's done like mainstream that is in the same, same genre, same feel. Does it sound comparable? If not, it wasn't pushed exactly where it needed to get. So it's like, that's my beef with people who do their own mastering, is it's often too safe. And that was the case with like Anna's song, is Alex kind of got it to, the safe good spot. He didn't know really how to push it because he's just too pulled back from it. So when you send it to somebody who's got that fresh perspective, they know, right away what needs to be fixed and where things could be pushed. And it's like, okay, well, if you need to crank 4 dB in the top end, do that. But if you're doing your own mixing and mastering, you might play it safe and like, well, I don't want to do 4 dB because that's crazy. I'm only going to do 1.5. But in reality, that specific song could have sounded perfect with 4,
Do you recommend artists like go to the producers or masters and be like, I want my song to sound like this? Like
having that's a really good way to do it, is always have a reference. Because I mean, that's what everyone's doing. It's like, oh, well, did you hear that album? Oh yeah, it's great. Like right now, everyone's comparing Drake and Kanye. So it's and everybody who I'm following, like producers and engineers, are just like either bashing the production or the
who do you like better?
People. I listen to both. I didn't really like have a good chance to listen to them. I'm not gonna say, but
they're fucking both like an hour and a half long each.
It's just it's just lost to me. There's too many songs, and I'm not much of a hip hop guy. It's funny because I mostly am mastering hip hop these days, but just for the sake of like, well, let me hear like the 2 most hyped albums right now. What do they sound like? I mostly listen to it just to hear like the production. I wasn't really listening for like the actual songs.
What genres do you like listen to most of the time then?
I mostly listen to like what I'm the genres that I'm working in, so it's mostly like pop and hip hop and not much rock. And
do bands, do they get their stuff mixed and mastered also, or?
Yeah, it's actually more common for like rock bands to actually go and outsource mastering, because it's not just somebody in their bedroom producing like a beat where that you can easily mix and master. It's like I used to do a whole bunch of like of the pop punk bands in Seattle when I was first starting out, and oh man, that's not my vibe. But yeah, I mean,
do you think most bands in Seattle are getting mastered or no?
It's hard to say. I mean, so many people just leave their credit, like the album credits, out of like their posts. I'm always looking for that just to like see who's involved with what.
Oh, like tag it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Tags are just like, it's super simple to say produced by at so and so, mixed at,
Yeah.
And I'm a huge advocate for like that, because all of us on the creative side and the production side, like it's all word of mouth. So that's kind of like unofficially word of mouth. You're not really saying, hey, go to this guy, but you're tagging, your producer, your engineer, your this or that, anybody who likes your song and like, oh, who did that? Who worked on that? They can go and see that. And it's like, oh, I can't tell you how many people hit me up like, oh, I heard what you did with so-and-so and I really like what you do. Like, what are your rates? And it's like, thank you for tagging me.
Yeah.
Like,
that's what I'm saying. That's one of the big things I like to point out with the podcast. Like, there's so many people behind the scenes that people don't think of.
Yep. And that's kind of like been my whole like mission over the last few years is like, okay, let me try and find everybody I can and like follow them and like engage and like try and get involved with everyone behind the scenes. Because I mean, what I'm trying to do at this point is I want to be the guy in Seattle for like mastering pop and hip hop. Took me many years to kind of find my place in the whole scene, because there's big competition in the area. There's like three or four like mastering studios specifically who are just specialized. So,
and they've been around since
whenever? A lot longer than I have. Like some of them like 20 plus years in Seattle. So we don't have the biggest music scene here. So trying to like tap into a specific like service that there's already like very focused and reputable studios, and then like everyone and their mom is doing mixing and mastering, is a really tough battle to like,
right.
How can I find my spot in the scene? And I kind of I met Jake Crocker, and that kind of opened doors to like other producers just like him. It kind of opened up the hip hop scene. I've been doing a lot of work with Milo Eubank from Lost Boys recording, and here and there some stuff that Elon's worked on and things like that. So I'm trying to like keep growing that and get more involved with that side of the scene, and kind of saying that I'm specializing in those categories, but in reality I can master pretty much everything but like black metal. Right. At this point I can't.
So that can mastering literally like make or break a song? Like, if someone doesn't get that mastered and send it to a blog, is it not going to get noticed as much as if it's mastered? Or like, how does that work?
Depends. If it was done decently, then no one's gonna know if it could have been mastered a little bit better. If it, in the end, if it's coming out and it sounds good and there's no like fundamental flaws, then no one's gonna know if it could have been better. But that's what I'm always telling people. It's like, you don't know if saving the whatever $100 or $50, whatever you're gonna pay to go and have a specialized mastering engineer do it. Like, you don't know if you're saving that money and having your producer do it for free. You don't know if the results, if that's going to pay off. So I don't know. I mean, what I always say is invest in the quality of the product, and because you want it to sound the best it can. That songs that sound good stream well.
Yeah. Do you see like a wealth gap between genres, and like, is a hip hop artist less likely that's up and coming going to be able to get their song mastered because of where they're coming from versus, like, I use this with like the Fluency interview, like someone coming from Central District versus an Anna Thompson who probably has the budget to get mixed and mastered?
Budget is, I would say, the number one factor, but then you can make the argument. It's like, I can't tell you how many people who I have a lot of engineers and producers who are always wanting to send me stuff, but they're like, yeah, we want to send you more, but like, just the clients just don't have the budget. And then I go and like I look on the artist's Instagram, and it's like, okay, well, that's why they don't have the budget. They're wearing like Gucci shoes and like spending their money on flashy things, and they have expensive cars, and it's like, yeah, of course you can't afford $100 a song to go outsource because you're spending $2,000 on a t-shirt or something like that. So and that's not to say that there aren't people who are just like financially challenged and doing the right things, but a lot of people are just being way too flashy. They're trying to like hype it up and make it seem like they're big, but it's like they're not even spending the right money on their productions, and things just kind of like sound mediocre.
Right.
So it's like, spend the money on the song, because that's going to live for eternity. Like your shoes and your shirt and jacket, like that'll come and go. That's kind of
like, I remember my favorite pair of shoes. I was probably like in middle school. they're like the dopest shoes at the time. I was like, oh fuck. So I get off the bus, and this girl behind me accidentally like flat tires me, and the entire like sole rips off. I'm like, fuck.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a delicate balance, because it's like, you know, image is a huge thing with the artist. So, you know, you want to put on the image that, like, you know, if you want to be like a pop superstar, you gotta kind of look at, or if you want to be like,
there's just no right answer. That's what's so annoying to me. Like, people think they know what the right answer is, but realistically, like, even people in the industry aren't giving the other people, like, you actually need to do this or that.
Yeah.
Don't do this. So it's just, everyone's just like doing whatever they think's gonna work, but half the time it's not the right time, not the right thing.
And I think the mainstream side of things has a lot of influence on that.
Yeah.
You know, you gotta stop comparing your situation to
Ariana Grande.
Yeah, you know, like, you're not gonna get anywhere if you're trying to like duplicate what they're doing, because they have millions of dollars and huge followings, and like half the time the clothes they're wearing they didn't even buy. It's like sponsors and things like that. So don't try and look like your idols, and you know, find the balance. Like, make your music sound as good as it can, and then, like, you know, go to the damn Goodwill. You can find some good stuff there. Like,
Macklemore made that song for a
reason. Exactly. So, you know, it kills me, because there's like so much music going on here, and like I know that, you know, all of the people behind the scenes can just be like full of work, and everybody can be in a good situation, and there can be a good community, but it's a lot of like, it's very separated.
Yeah, we'll fix that.
Yeah.
I think that's not even a hope. I know we'll fix it. It just takes time. Where do you see the music industry going in the next 5 years? Any big changes in genres or whatever?
Oh man, I hope it stays the same. The big thing that's kind of freaking me out is the whole like artificial intelligence movement that's happening with at least the behind the scenes stuff, like mixing and mastering. It's getting pretty big, of like automated mastering services and things like that, which, you know, it's always in the back of my mind, like, am I going to be replaced by a robot? But
that's crazy.
Yeah. I mean, those services were created for a specific market, and it's like, you know, people who just need to constantly, like, you know, batch master a whole bunch of like just basic stuff. But anybody who's actually doing music is still using either a human or a specialized like mastering facility. So I don't know. I hope it stays the same. I hope technology helps it get better. We seem to be going down more and more of like we're getting separated from mixing and mastering. It's just kind of, everything's just meshing too much. So I hope more people like myself and
just say it, shit music's becoming more acceptable.
Yeah, I hope more people just, you know, help educate up and coming artists on like the process and how it needs to be done. And because ultimately it's like, if the music stops sounding good, it's just like, oh.
Yeah. Well, what is some advice that you have for up and coming artists, creators, influencers?
I think I'm just going to go back to kind of like the theme of what I've been talking about, is question the process. Don't let, if you're going to somebody to make an album, or you're making music, don't just accept what gets sent to you. Like, even, you know, you get that V1 master and it sounds better than the mix. Like, is that the best it could be? Like, reference things, like question the process. Know the ins and outs. Like, don't just accept what people send you, and then from there, like, take that beautiful product that you have, market that thing, get your brand going. Like, marketing. That's the thing. If you want to make it in this industry as a musician, or even if you're trying to do the behind the scenes stuff, like, you have to have branding and marketing, and you have to have people want to come to you for something. So dive into that as much as you would clothes and all of that other junk that really just doesn't matter.
Yes, sir. And what is the easiest way to reach you?
My website, or I'm most active on Instagram at Matthew Wolk Mastering, Matthew with 2 T's. I'm on TikTok, but I can't really figure out my place on that yet. So maybe eventually I'll have some presence there, but Instagram's kind of where I'm the most active. So
Hell yeah. This is the NAST podcast with
Matthew Wolk Mastering.
And we did it.